Okay, so I think the next thing that we really want to talk about is the next section is information assurance management. And some of the things that we may want to take into consideration when coming up with your plan. Now, the textbook talks about IA management in 3 different models: a centralized model, decentralized, and then some sort of hybrid model, which takes the best of both centralized and decentralized. And a lot of these have to do with the size of the actual organization and determining which type of model that you want to try to implement. The larger the organization, the more resources, the more likely you are to have a more centralized function. Keep in mind that the particular organization that we're using is not significantly large. It's not that I would consider a large organization anything over 1,000 nodes, end user nodes, PCs, and then a medium-sized one, someplace between 100 and 1,000 would be medium, and then under 100, I would say small. So I think that, and that's just how I look at things and how I look at determining the size. So a large organization would have over 1,000 end users, and then someplace in between 100 and 1,000, that would be a medium organization. That's going to make a difference to me when I look at, how or what type of information security framework as it relates to management models I'm going to try to implement within a particular organization. And then if it's a small one, that's an entirely different issue when we get around to looking at, how or what we would use to implement an information security plan within that type of size of organization. I'm not going to use any of those. I think that the textbook does a decent enough job describing them. I want to talk about how I would probably do this. A couple of things that I want to iron out real quick. I've used this term a couple of times. Information security blueprint. The information security blueprint really describes the existing controls and identifies other necessary security controls, and that's really what we're trying to do here as part of our management plan, is look at some of the existing controls that are in place at that particular organization. And then based on that, we may want to come up with some additional controls that we might recommend. And this is how we go about laying out our future as an information assurance or information security department. We're not flying by our seat of our pants. We're being more proactive as opposed to reactive. Sometimes I use this term called a framework. And the difference, I think, here between a framework and a blueprint is just a more thorough. This is just a more thorough analysis or thorough development of that blueprint. It sets out some of the models that we expect to be followed, in the creation and the design, selection, and initial implementation of, of any subsequent security controls. So our blueprint lays out our existing controls and might make some additional recommendations as far as other controls that we expect to see. And then we take that blueprint and we blow it out a little bit more, and we really get into talking about, again, the creation of the design, the selection, the initial implementation of subsequent security controls that we may have decided to create. And this follows that security system development lifecycle that we talked about a couple of classes ago, right? It's that waterfall methodology of determining what we need, doing a needs analysis, doing the investigation, looking at our resources, deciding whether we're going to build something or we're going to try to go out and buy it off the shelf. We're going to test it. We're going to put maintenance in place. We're going to revise our plan as we go along. So our framework really does look at building out a more robust information assurance blueprint. A security module, or a security model, on the other hand, is a little bit different in that it's basically a general blueprint offered by the Information Assurance Organization and the Information Assurance Plan function, which is based upon probably an existing standard or an existing model like ISO standards or COVID or COSO or NIST. We use security models all the time when we start thinking about what we want our framework to look like, right? There are lots of very good ones out there that we can look at and use as a model or our information assurance management plan. So that's one way of going about doing this for those of us who are still kind of hung up on, what should it look like. We can go out to a variety of areas. Like I said, mentioned, NIST is a free one, and I'm going to give you some resources on that. COVID, which is not free, but some of the resources are out there and readily available to kind of help you move you along through this process. So that's kind of what I want you to think about when you're doing this. Look at information assurance models. We can kind of help us understand where we might go look. I'm going to push you towards national standards and technologies. There's some really good ones out there. I'll mention them later. Kind of help you move through this. And we talked about, the other methodology that you can use is baselining. You could go out and find similar organizations and see what they are doing as far as building their information assurance or information management plan, and see what kind of controls they're using, see what kind of policies they have, and so forth and so on. So that's another resource for you to go out and look at as we come up to this next section of IA management and what it should look like. So if I started looking at my management plan, there's some things that I think the management plan should touch on and be concerned with. Now, 4 general objectives or 5 general objectives for your IA management layer 2. In establishing that management program, you want to make sure that you understand that there's a need, and the organization understands that there's a need for upper management support. Identify some of the key components of an effective IA management. Determine some specific approaches to information assurance management and discuss any challenges of managing the function within the organization given the known resources, and then identify some metrics for selling security to management. So, you should be able to see how this section ties into very nicely some of the metrics that we talked about in the first few discussion modules, because what we're really trying to do here is sell the organization on the need for implementing a robust information assurance management plan, which obviously incorporates some of the functional components of, the number of personnel and so forth and so on. So what we want to do in this plan is we really want to list and describe the basic functions of functional components of the information security plan. We want to discuss how to plan and staff the IA function within the organization. Remember, I think in this instance, I think we're really dealing with a medium-sized organization, 100 to less than 1,000 end users. And we want to look at some of the internal and external factors as it relates to the function of the organization. And then, I think also this section we would want to list and describe some of the functional job titles and functions within that organization. And these, obviously don't need to be very detailed, but it would be interesting to see and put into our plan how we saw our IA function would look. And here we would also want to probably discuss some of the components of security education, training, and awareness program that we might have. Let me talk about how we would organize the IA function within an organization. We want to look at a couple of factors, a couple of variables I think are important. We want to look at the organizational culture, their posture towards information security, how they feel about it, the importance of it, the historical perspective. We want to look at any existing staffing as it relates to information security or information assurance. How many people do we have, full-time, part-time? That includes looking at the budget as well for staffing. We want to also look at or take into consideration any security budget, security capital budget that we might have purchasing new technologies and new solutions. And then we also want to look at things like size of the function. Right, we want to look at size, number of personnel, so forth and so on. If we knuckle into personnel budget, look at actual functions within the IA department, you should recognize that the IA function, IA staffing, is directly related to the size of the organization, which seems to be kind of obvious in most cases. That's where that small, medium, and large size organization comes into play. You also have to take into consideration things like office politics. Seems like kind of a strange thing to say or relate to as it relates to an academic class, but you kind of saw that again in the first case study where there was some inter-office politics that the Chief Information Security Officer had to deal with as it relates to the longevity of the program. We need to be concerned about economy as it relates to budget forecasting. keep in mind that Farmington Academy is a private institution, so you would have to be aware of that as it relates to enrollment. And this is going to really affect senior management's decision as it relates to personnel. Right? How many people are they going to be willing to hire? How many people can they afford to hire? And if we look at capital expenses underneath the IA function, we want to look at things budgeting, capital budgeting anyway. We have to look at, for the IA function, offices, a computing resources for the IA function. As well as, if you are fortunate enough to actually be able to get it, a testing facility would be nice. So that you have the opportunity to run system updates and whatnot in a controlled environment before you roll it out to the production unit. It's always nice to try to get that. So when we look at general size of the organization, related to a large organization, it's going to have more than 1,000 PCs or nodes. In an organization such as that, you're really looking at some sort of centralized security management function. Large organization, large department, likely to be staffed and funded at a level that enables the function to actually accomplish most of the information security functions independently. If that were the case, it would be recommended that the functions be separated into 4 areas. The first area, you would be looking at some non-technical business units. Outside of IT, and you would typically see like legal function, and more than likely this is where we will put our training as well. Another area that we would expect second would be functions that are performed by IT groups outside of the IA function. And here I'm thinking about systems and network administration. Still have to work with the IA function. Information assurance, information security is still deeply invested in these role within the organization of the system and network administrators, and they should still have input on certain things and at least be working collaboratively, but that would be usually pushed outside the IA function. The third area that we would want to see, the third unit, okay, is that function, the function provided by the IA department as a customer service. This would include things like risk assessment, System testing. And incident response are the three areas that would be provided by information assurance or information security function as a customer service type of related function. Customer service related as it relates to the organization as a whole. And then the fourth function would be those services that are performed by the IA department or function. But these are more along the lines of for compliance enforcement obligation as it relates to compliance enforcement. And I'm thinking in here, we would see things like policy creation, policy, compliance and auditing, and then risk assessment or risk management, the risk management process. So if you look at those four areas, and if the organization were as large as 1,000 PCs, a large organization, more than 1,000 PCs, with a centralized function, we'd have four individualized departments underneath with each specific job responsibilities. And if that's how you choose to write your IA management plan, then that's fine. There's nothing to say that you couldn't take the same approach for an organization the same size as Bradenton Academy. I think that what you would probably have then is multiple people performing multiple functions in an organization the size of Bradenton Academy. It still is the Chief Information Security Officer's responsibility to see that all these functions are adequately performed within the organization, regardless of the function. But that's one way of laying it out. Excuse me. So if we looked at it kind of as a flow chart, we would see that I think you would have the Chief Information Security Officer with two dotted lines underneath him, or two lines underneath him, and we'd have what I would refer to as a technical security, right? Technical security on one side, and then we'd have risk, compliance, and audit over on the other side. And underneath that, we would expect that we could further divide this up into, perhaps two areas, some sort of perimeter security, things, folks that were responsible for functions like the firewalls, intrusion detection systems, prevention systems. And then on the other side, we would have individuals that were responsible for things like malware, and then, internal servers and so forth. And we would have a variety of full-time and part-time staff that would be responsible for that. If we looked at, again, depending on the size of the organization, it should be relatively the same as in comparison. So that's how I would probably lay out a function within a typical large organization. And then, if it were a large organization, or a very large organization, we could add other things in here, like, vulnerability assessment. And, put underneath each of these things like DMZ, the intranet, clients and web servers, so forth and so on. Malware, we can put, servers and clients and whatnot. So depending on the organization, you could break those down even a little bit more. I think, more reflective of the case study that we're working on. We're more likely to be considered a medium-sized organization. So we're not going to have the luxury. We could probably still do some of the multi-tiered approaches to security, but a lot of the central authentication function we would hand off to system administrators, just because as an IAA function we just wouldn't have the staffing. And some of the functions of a large organization we might not be able to do. Again, the CIO, Chief Information Security Officer, is going to have to work with, and this is key in your plan, work with improving collaboration amongst information security and the IT department. So that's going to be a challenge. So really what we're going to end up with here is some sort of security manager as the overall function. And then depending on size, and this is going to be something that you're going to have to look at, you're going to have a security administrator. Right? One tier. And then on the other side, you're going to have some security technicians that will do some of the functional role within the IA function. Then we have even less segregation if we looked at smaller organizations. I think that, to me, I think of some of the best resources, again, I mentioned them before, some of the things that we see at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So if we looked at some of those standards, National Institute of Standards and Technology, we see that some of the handbooks that you can look for in developing your IA plan include things like, the elements of computer security, all the things that we've already talked about. We want to look at roles and responsibilities, and there's a manual out there on that of the IA function. We also want to look at some of the common threats, and that relates to IT. We want to look at common network security controls. Risk management. Is another area that we want to focus on. Security program management. And I'll give some specific references to certain handbooks as it relates to this in the third video. And then, obviously, contingency planning, which I think is a layer that you're going to see later on anyway. If you look at individual or defining the roles within the organization of information assurance, we can break it down into really three different things. We look at those roles, those individuals that define, those that build, and those that administer. And then typically, most of the job functions will fit into one of those several categories. Going down from the CISO, sometimes they're referred to as chief security officers or chief information security officers. They may be also called the directors of security or senior security manager, so forth and so on. We would be able to define those in a hierarchy if we had an organization with a chief information security officer who might have an external security consultant working with them, some sort of dotted line to them. Underneath them, again, keeping in mind those that define, those that build, those that administer, those that define, those that build, those that administer. Underneath that, we would have a security manager. And then under that individual, I would break it down into 4 individual categories. Some sort of security officer, or investigator, security staff, the security administration analyst or security analyst, would be the third, and then security technician. Those that define, those that build, those that administer. If we looked at individual job responsibilities, that security manager would be really accountable for the day-to-day operations of the program. He would be working on objectives that were established by the CISO, right? Resolve any issues identified by technicians, the analysts, the staff, security administrators, and analysts. Down here, this function, I would expect that those individuals would probably be a hybrid of security technicians and security managers. They're very usually specialized security administrators. They analyze and design solutions around specific domains. If you looked at the technicians, they would be the ones that would be configuring the firewalls and the intrusion detection systems and the security software, diagnose, troubleshoot problems, coordinate with system and network administrators to ensure security technology is properly implemented. So these guys would be working with network administrators on the outside the IA function. They would also be responsible for watching the intrusion controls and monitoring email accounts and performing the routine security roles. This is often considered an entry-level position right here. And they would work their way up. Security consultants, usually some sort of external independent expert that you might bring in. Not always going to find that this exists, but occasionally it might be there. Security officers and investigators, they work very closely with law enforcement and or the criminal justice function in the event that something needs to have outside resources brought in. And then you would also might find yourself working with help desk personnel to enhance the security team's ability to identify potential problems and be prepared to identify any other issues as it relates to security role. So I mentioned also underneath organization of information assurance function, we would want to ensure that we have here, we would expect to see security education, training and awareness function built in. As it relates, we're going to have to enforce policies, and part of the public policy is security education and training. But it's responsibility of the chief information security officer to make sure that this program is implemented. And it's, again, designed to reduce the incidences of accidental security breaches by members of the organization. And if we look back in the recent history, we see that many of the breaches still occur because there's just issues related to simple mishandling of potential threats to an organization. Security education training really offers three benefits to the organization. If we look at that, the first, obviously, it can improves employee behavior. It makes them better. We've had quite a lengthy discussion within the discussion modules about the benefits of security education training and awareness. It also serves to improve the information to individuals of the organization about where to report violations of policies. So that we can expedite the handling. And it also really enables the organization to hold employees responsible for violations, for their actions, responsible, accountable for their actions. So three basic benefits of making sure that you have that security education training and awareness firmly rooted in the organization of the information assurance. It does other things too, builds in-depth knowledge of the design and implementation of security programs. It helps develop skills and knowledge of the average user as well as the security function. And improves awareness of the needs to protect. And again, we looked at this as it relates to certain metrics in one of the case studies as well. And then if you get into, how is it delivered? How is this program delivered out? Do we have budgeting for it? So forth and so on. The needs of the organization should come first. The security education training awareness program has to be tailored to the individual functions within the department or within the organization, so it can be a little expensive as well. But it's well worth it. It's often building it is more difficult than maintaining it, but you want to kind of take the approach of keeping things light. You're not there to preach to them. You don't want to use too much detail. You want to make sure that the individuals that are going through the training understand their roles, and then how a breach in security can affect their jobs. Want to take advantage of in-house resources when you do this to deliver the message. You want to make sure that awareness program is formal in that it's part of their training and it's implemented in an annual way or semi-annual way. And then, you're really looking to provide good information early rather than information late. So, we want to make sure that individuals are aware that information security is about people and only incidentally related to technology. If you want others to understand and learn how to speak the language that they can understand, you want them to be able to understand what you're talking about. You're going to introduce some new language, make sure that they're familiar with some terminology. If they don't understand the terminology, if they don't understand what you're talking about, they're not going to be able to learn how to protect, how they can protect the organization. Make sure that when you implement a security training program that you make your points so that you can identify them clearly. And so the participants, remember, we want to make sure that we're talking about technical issues in a non-technical way. This is why we're practicing these special topics presentations. We're taking something that is complex and we're cooking it down and making it pretty straightforward. We're expressing ourselves in a clear way that an average individual might be able to understand it. Keep a sense of humor, right? And then, tell your individuals what, tell them what you want them to learn and then you have to reinforce it with them because it's not their primary responsibility while they're there. So you have to constantly reinforce your message with this training and awareness program. I would expect that this function, this particular segment would really focus on in your final presentations about developing a good security awareness training program, and it's going to then you'll be able to trickle it through the next few sections that relate to it as well. All right, and then the third, I'm going to stop this recording, and then I'll do the third recording on information architecture.